Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, wherever you're joining us. Welcome to another episode of Coping in Color with Black Mental Health. My name is Noreen Sibanda, and I'm joined by Dr. Lisa Ndejuru today. And we are going to be having another interesting conversation about Black mental health, how we can better take care of ourselves. And with that, I'm going to ask Dr. Lisa to introduce herself and let us know some of the work that she does.
So good morning. Here in Montreal, Dojage, it is around noon, so it's almost good afternoon. So my name is Dr. Lisa Ndejuru. What I do, I work with Black mental health. So when I'm here in North America, on Turtle Island, when I'm in Africa, in Rwanda in particular, then it's just mental health. When I say Black mental health, there people go like, "What do you mean?" Um, so I love that. I love that reminder. Uh, um, what do I do? I work with. I've been working with stories of a lot of trauma stories, but stories of I've been working with mental health and wellness and personal development in the Black community for the past, I want to say, the past almost 30 years. Um, I worked with my family, with my community, but then it got broader and broader and broader, and it's now a beautiful moment to be able to. Um, it doesn't mean that we all have the same stories. We don't,
Mhm.
but there is a conversation that we
Mm,
can have together. Like we can have dialogue where we each come from our places, and it's
mhm.
actually generative, where the sum is bigger than like the whole is bigger than the sum of the parts. Yeah.
Definitely.
Um, the past 3-4 years, I've been working with Black Healing Center in particular, an organization here in Montreal, Jajage, and we've been creating community, like collective care circles, healing our stories, retreats around trauma. We've been creating retreats and programming for women, for men, for queer folks. A lot of programming. I also lead a SHIRK, so Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council funded grant. With It's a community-led initiative, research initiative, asking about what Black wellness means to people. So it's a community-centered knowledge fostering Black wellness in Montreal. So yeah, that's what. And recently, the most recent thing is I've been organizing. I've been creating or getting off the ground my own organization. It's called Omora Healing,
Mm,
where all of the different pieces I've been working with art, with research, with therapy, with coaching, with all kinds of different modalities for healing. I've been working with those. I've been working here in on Turtle Island. I've been working internationally, and I wanted a place to put all of these things together. So Mora Healing was created, and my last baby is a community, an online community for Black women. It's called Kumwe. So together, Turi Kumwe, we're together, and that's my latest. That's going to start in December. I'm very excited about this.
Oh, exciting, exciting. And I mean, 30 plus years of experience I can definitely see why it's even challenging for you to introduce yourself, because it's like, where do I begin with all of this stuff? So I'm going to start us off with asking you, what has been a sliding door moment in your career and in the work that you do?
Well, the other when you explained the sliding door moment, I was
Mhm.
like, wait, what? Hmm. And then I thought about Um, in 1996, um, I was in Rwanda. It was 2 years, like a year and a half after the genocide,
Mm-hmm.
and I was with my uncle. I was at my uncle's house, and I hadn't gone there since before the genocide, like in
Mm.
1990, and just before the war started, and and so my head was full of these terrible things that we had seen on. I wasn't there. I wasn't in Rwanda at the time. I was here, and I was looking at at the what was happening in the community. I had
Mm.
what was we were it was live on television. So I had all of these thoughts and ideas, and people there were like, "Whew, you're really dramatic," you know. Um, but I remember um, going there, and like I had a contract when I
Mm.
came back, right? And I was like I wanted to stay, and I was torn between
Mm.
coming back here and staying there.
Yeah.
And there was this person, my uncle was saying, like, I was like, what am I gonna do? What am I gonna do? And he was like, me, just pick up anything. Like everything is to be done. Like the whole country's in like
Mhm.
what you could you could literally pick up anything,
Everything.
right?
Yeah. Do something.
Everything is to be like do.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, but I don't know any, like I was really up in, a lot of fear about, but I don't have like I don't know what to contribute was my.
Mm.
And I there was a there I mean I spoke French, I could have done all kinds of things, but I didn't feel like I could.
Mm.
And there was a person there, like, it was an Italian NGO. He was like, hey, if you want to work
Guess what?
Monday, you can work.
Mm.
And I was like, do I stay? Do I go? And I went.
Mm.
My uncle said, you feel like you have to learn something? Go, fine, learn something.
Mm.
When I went, I did my master's et tout ça. Mais could have gone,
Yeah. In a
yeah,
completely different direction.
completely different direction, right?
Yeah.
Everything was to be built, everything
Yeah.
was to be.
Yeah. Well, and I hear part of witnessing even a year and a half later those experiences is not, it's not an easy thing, especially when you think about where does the healing of the community take place and where does my own individual healing take place as well. So I want to ask you a question that is off script for a second here. Where do you see the value of doing that individual healing versus doing the community healing? Because sometimes as a community, we say it takes a village to raise a child, but it can also take a village to wreck a child. So, how and when do we decide?
Oh, to wreck a child? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Mm.
So, when do we decide to do that individual healing versus doing the communal healing, especially within the Black context and the Black mental health context?
Very interesting question. I am I am, I lean towards community,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that is my leaning. And I don't think it's an either or question,
Mm.
because I think that even when you are working in community, you're working on your own thing. You have to
Mm.
have a connection to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it helps to be in community because if you're each doing your own thing, but you're doing it together, I
Mm-hmm.
think there's strength to be gotten.
Mm-hmm.
But this is not in the same context as when you feel unsafe, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like when you are unsafe like when community is where you are hurt,
Mm-hmm.
then that might not be where the healing is, at least not at first, right?
Yep.
Like it you need to be, I mean, the person, whoever needs to be, I need to be where I feel safe
Mm-hmm.
first,
Mm-hmm.
right? To be able to even address, engage with the things that are inside, not, you know,
Yeah.
I need to be in an environment where it's it's supportive, it's safe, it's
Mm-hmm.
where I can, when you're hurt, it's hard to go and touch these things. Like a
Mm-hmm.
lot of inside will be like, "Nyeh,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to necessarily."
Mm-hmm.
So doing this hard work in an environment that is hard and painful, I
Yeah.
think that it's too much to ask of someone. It doesn't have to be that way.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that you can even, I mean, nothing is impossible, but I think that it's, when you're still fighting that,
Mm.
yeah, anyway, I've already gone round in circles around this. Yeah.
Well, and isn't that part of the storytelling, right?
Yeah.
Well, we do have to tell the story around it to understand the context. And um, with what you're saying, it's not necessarily you have to do it completely by yourself or only in community, but maybe one picks up when the other one leaves, and but also they can take place at the same time. But we have to remember that we need an environment that is cuddly, supportive, allows
Yes.
you to do that,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
cuddles you in that way, right? And at times we want to focus on healing the community when it might be more beneficial to do the individual that would then take care of the community, because we are community after all, right?
I
If the
think so. I mean,
individual.
I don't know, like nobody, I mean, I say this now, and I feel like I can't anymore because a lot of people are hurting because they're feeling lonely and alone. A
Mm-hmm,
lot.
mm-hmm,
So it's not even as though community was like so easy to create or be a part of. It's not true. It's not always that clear, right?
mm-hmm.
And it's not always true that community is a wholesome place either.
Yep.
But when you do find, like, one of the things that I find in community, when it's a community that wants your well-being, right? Then there are things, it gives you strength. Like when you're in the when you were, I don't know if that's what, like, when you were a child, right? And it was dark,
Mm,
huh? And you're like,
mm-hmm.
and the thing that used to be something that is just hanging, like the bathrobe that is just hanging on the thing,
Yeah.
it's huge
It
and
tends
it's
to
very,
tell-
very scary. It's a monster, and it's
Yeah.
it's going to move, and it's going to, then there's sounds, I don't know, but there's sound.
Mm-hmm.
But then if your little sister comes into your bed with you, or you go into,
Mm-hmm.
or you
Yeah.
go into your parents' bed, for some
Mm-hmm.
reason the monsters can't get you,
No, no.
and it feels so much less scary. And I think that this sort of, like, the being together as solace,
Mm,
as you know where you find strength, that is the kind of community that I'm thinking about, the kind
yeah.
of community where what hurts you can talk about, and you feel, that it touches other people too, and people have different ways of dealing with it. Sometimes it's you offering something, a perspective that's helpful. Sometimes it's another person that's like, oh, that's an interesting way of
Of looking at
of
it.
dealing
Yeah.
with it. And
Mm-hmm.
then it resonates with you, and you can integrate it. You know what I mean? So I think that that is the kind of community that I find really helpful,
Yeah.
but it doesn't happen all the time. So
No, it
sometimes.
doesn't happen all the time. Can you tell us a little bit about the experiences of the Black community in Montreal and how they are accessing resources? What are some of the barriers and what are some of the strengths that you see coming up, even through grassroots organizations and some of the great work that you will be doing as well?
So one of the things that, how people would say, so the Black community, I think, is it's much more heterogeneous,
Mm-hmm.
heterogène. There's many, many communities, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
um, between the francophone,
Mm-hmm.
and the Commonwealth people, between the island and the Africans, between those who have been here for a number of generations and feel, part of
Mm.
the part
Yeah.
of the foundations. There are different experiences. People who've been here for a while, people that are just coming in, very, very different
Mm.
perspectives. Um, I think one of the things for people who are looking for, like, one of the things that people say was that, you know, used to be that there's so much stigma around mental health in the
Mhm.
Black community.
Mhm.
Yes. And what is also true, and I think that which is truer, is that a lot of people are reaching out for help. A lot of people are reaching out for help, and
Mhm.
they're not finding it. There's a huge underrepresentation of Black professionals in the system,
Mhm.
um, and this is, I mean, is it in the training? Is it in the
Mm.
hiring afterwards? Is it in the, like, we could analyze what that is about,
Mhm.
but there's an underrepresentation of Black people, Black service providers, in relation to the Black community who would like to see Black service providers. Like all of the people that are in the in the mental health field, like all of my colleagues have waiting lists, and that
Mm.
means that people can't access, not because they
They don't
don't
want
want
to.
to, or
Mhm.
taboo, or because they don't want to pay,
Mhm.
because those are the things that are so often
Mm.
connected to us, right?
Mhm.
That's not the thing. It's, even if they want to and they want to pay, they can't, like, there are not enough people out there. So I think that that is something that needs to be said, and I'm really sort of um, very encouraged by the efforts that I'm seeing in the different psychology departments in the different universities, where there's actually, like, these past years have seen a push, right, to
Mhm.
make sure that
Mhm.
we get recruited, and that we get sort of, so that, well, I'm not also saying, and this is, I want to be clear on that, that mental health, or mental well-being, or emotional well-being is necessarily has to do with mental health professionals. I think that there are many healing modalities, and there are lots of people doing beautiful things out there, right?
Mhm.
Like, so I don't want to, like, I think that it takes a lot of different types of healing
Mhm.
to be taking care of people, and I think that we could talk more about what is out there and what that does, right? What do the different modalities do for people?
Mhm.
What can they go and get? Because I think that also the way the conversation is sort of shaped, people feel like, it feels as though whenever we feel badly, we have to go see a therapist, when, you know there are many, many ways to
True.
work with malaise, with,
Mhm.
I think that it's good to go, and, I mean, this is my own bias, right? Like, therapy is good all the time, but, like, also we can enjoy, the idea that, something is always wrong with us
Mm.
is not necessarily a useful perspective, right?
Mhm.
um I feel as though I went into a different direction than your question.
No, don't
um
worry about it. You touched on a few essential things, right? The underrepresentation of service providers, and some of those barriers could be in the education system, it could be in the hiring practices. Um, as I was saying offline, I moved from Montreal to Edmonton, and part of that was we were colonized by the British, and it was like we could learn French, but let's go somewhere where it's going to be a direct thing, right? And somehow we ended up around the same spaces, doing similar work, right? So, really, there is a nuanced conversation around that. But I like what you're saying about creating spaces of healing that don't necessarily see only one way of healing, including natural ways or indigenous ways of healing that have always been in part of people, right? So you
Mm.
were talking earlier about the loneliness. You could go sit at the feet of your elders, and that would be healing, and it would replenish you, right? And now
Mm.
we have um, titles and coaches and all of these things that we assign to, like doing different things, but there's always been other ways of healing that have been in place. Maybe now we're working with systems that we're trying to get those systems to value them equally and see that there's value in them. And one of
Mm.
the ways in which Black Mental Health Canada does that is having an Afrocentric um, approach to mental health training that it offers to service providers. And this is open for any individual that is interested and wants to work with anyone that identifies as such, and understanding some of those nuances and seeing that maybe simply calling someone into your office and saying, talk, does not do it.
Right? Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're working with an Afro positive approach,
Hmm.
um, and trying to articulate what that, how that, what that means. But absolutely, I agree. And then there's another thing that I'm thinking about a lot, like there like these class things, you know?
Mm-hmm.
There's these ideas around sort of okay, so we can go to therapy, but then if we there's an underrepresentation of people in the professional space, but then there's an overrepresentation of
Mm-hmm.
people in those spaces, like for example, I'm thinking about the carceral system, um, the youth protection
Mm-hmm.
system. These systems, in those systems, were overrepresented, right? And what does that mean
Mm-hmm.
when these people in those systems have few accesses also, because the gaze that is on them is also going to be
Mm-hmm.
sort of is always going to push them back into, oh god, there's something there that I'm,
Mm-hmm.
and there's another thing that I'm not quite sort of that I'm not quite articulating either, but that I'll try. There is something that has to do with when things are, if we're talking about social determinants
Mm-hmm.
of health, um, like if there is stability,
Mm-hmm.
if you have housing,
Mm-hmm.
education, work, tout ça, if there are these stabilizing sort of, uh, then you put other things on. If those things aren't there,
No, there's no
what
there's no
kind of,
being up top,
you
right?
know, what
Maslow's
why
hierarchy of
why
needs.
what are we talking about? Like,
Yeah.
is it going to be like, come in and let's have a conversation about it?
Mm-hmm.
Like, there has to be, there have to be very concrete
Mm-hmm.
um, things, uh, you know funds, opportunities,
Mm-hmm.
like a very social kind of medicine that makes it so that there are some things that are taken care of,
Mm-hmm.
better than they are now. Like I was thinking a lot about people, we've trained some community care practitioners, so they're not mental health professionals, but they're
Mm-hmm.
community people with backgrounds in different healing and mental health
Mm-hmm.
modalities, and who've sort of decided to
Take this
train.
up.
They
Yeah.
get training for um, 3 months of training, 3 months of internships, and 6 months of community care.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a year of training where they really are working with people, and we're working with Black focused organizations,
Mm-hmm.
nonprofits. And so those Black focused organizations work with people who are, uh, like the struggle is real, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like and um, when one of the things that I wanted at one point was to, you know, I didn't want our community care practitioners to be alone. Like, I
Mm.
want them to be like a front line, and
Mm-hmm.
then to have, you know, if
Someone to like
something is
refer.
harder, then they can escalate to,
Mm-hmm.
so it makes it easy. There's less waiting time for people.
Mm-hmm.
um the professionals aren't as burdened. They can
Mm-hmm.
support. There's a that there should be layers of care.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we were talking to an organization that works with people who have experience of incarceration. I was thinking, I feel like there's not a lot of support for people, right? And
Yeah.
what I heard was like, is there really, like, are they incentivized to stay out,
Mm.
right? Or is the
Mm-hmm.
incentive to go back inside? And I've been
Juggling, toying,
uh,
trying to like,
uh,
yeah. Yeah,
uh-uh.
yeah. No, I completely understand what you're saying. And it makes me think of the friendship bench approach that was started out in Zimbabwe, where
Mhm,
a
mhm.
psychiatrist supports elders, and then they just put a bench and they go sit. People come and they talk, and if it is something that is beyond their scope, they escalate it to the next level and then to the next level as needed, right? And I find if we have a almost that like top down model to like care, it tends to be really fragmented in how people are going to engage with it, right? And I think you use the word class about it, where some people will have access and then others won't. But if we have it saying there's always been natural ways of healing, there's always been ways in which we took care of ourselves, and while we're doing that, how can we incorporate that and continue to bring it up? Because as much as we want everyone to go to therapy, we can only have so many therapists at a particular time for everyone to get covered, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's
Right.
not
So,
always useful, like,
no,
we're not like,
no, we're
yeah.
not the magic wand. Like I only have that one on Wednesdays. So today is Thursday. So there's no magic wand today. So we're not going to be able to do it all, right? But also coming from that interdisciplinary team, where is the social worker that can go help with the housing? Where is the community worker that can go help with a specific thing? Maybe having a conversation with a police officer. Like all of those layers need to be in place and weave together so that it doesn't feel like mental health continues to be an ostracized thing of like, you go take care of this by yourself. And I think it brings us back to that first question I asked of like, how do we do the healing, whether as an individual, as a community, but it's more about infusing all of that together. So we're going to take a minute break here, listeners, and we'll be right back with you with more with Dr. Lisa as we continue our conversation. Welcome back. Welcome back. If you have any questions or there's something that we've been talking about that you're quite interested in us to expand on, please feel free to engage with us and ask those questions. We're not just here having the conversation by ourselves, we want you to be part of it as well. We do have Dr. Lisa here today, and this is an opportunity to ask her all these questions that have been burning. And it's an opportunity for us to hear what are some of the things that you were thinking about when it comes to Black mental health and how we even conceptualize that. At the beginning of our conversation, Dr. Lisa, you mentioned something about the difference between Black mental health when you are in Canada versus mental health when you are back in the continent. And it made me reflect on I didn't know I was Black until I showed up here. So,
Right?
yeah.
It's a gaze. It's the gaze that makes us sort
Mm-hmm,
of. That's why I like this idea of racialization, right? Like
mm-hmm.
we don't do that. We don't come up with that by ourselves. Like when we're by ourselves, we're just people.
Yeah,
Uh, huh?
yeah.
And it's the gaze that makes you
Mm-hmm,
racialized, and that
mm-hmm,
projects all sorts of qualities, or qualities not in a neutral way, right? Like all
mm-hmm,
sort of properties onto what that might mean, right? And then you're stuck with sort of like, okay, so do I so if I can I put that down a minute, and who am I, like,
yes.
uh,
Yeah.
without all of that, right? Because we
Mm-hmm.
if you grow up in it, it's something that is like you see yourself with that gaze, right? And it's
Yeah.
it's very, very, very sort of
Ah,
gaze.
yes. And like you said, then you have individuals that have been here for a couple of generations, and how are they making sense of that? How are they understanding those experiences? And I know we're talking mental health, but we cannot talk about the racialized experience of mental health without talking about the impact of racism and how that continues to either maintain some of those understandings, but also it leaves us having to negotiate two identities: how we see ourselves and how we're seen. And
Mm.
um, like I said, I'm not Black until I get here. When I get to the continent, I forget about my race.
Yeah. And like even like when you're then it's sort of like, um do you speak the language over
Mm.
there?
Hmm.
Are you part of the community, like the people who are
Yes.
here, right? Like
Yeah.
first, second, third generation, and then it's like, but are you even
Yeah.
Black enough? Huh? For your own people, like,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then it becomes this whole, I'm really happy that I'm older now, right? Like that those questions are like,
Yeah.
yes, that's all part of it, but it doesn't feel so,
Mm.
because those are questions that, like, these questions, like those questions of identity and belonging, they hurt, right?
Yeah.
It hurts.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about the relationship to people. Like I'm thinking about young women, for example, in that age, in their late, like early 20s, mid 20s,
Hmm.
negotiating, the sort of the primary relationship, right? Like the sort of the, I'm they've studied, they're
Hmm.
working already, and then it's sort of like they want to partner up, which is like
Yeah.
how do you partner up, make family, and sort of the
Mhm.
feeling of not not representing uh, the object of desire, right? Like
Mm. Mhm.
not being representative of the fantasy, right?
Yeah.
When this person thought of
Yeah.
uh, their dream person, they
Mhm.
never would have thought of
Mhm.
someone who looks like me, right? And that is
Yeah.
still going on in people, right? Uh, Maybe if they're, so yeah, anyway, like there's a whole bunch of, like, I was thinking of the ways in which people then see their own, like when you internalize this idea that
Hmm.
that we're not as, and then you can put all kinds of qualifiers on that,
Under that.
right?
Yeah.
As I have
Feeling
all these,
with that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Of course, when you're, this is a podcast, so it's you can't see me sort of putting all the adjectives
There
out
is a
there.
sense come with it, that feeling. But that's
Yeah.
the beauty of having a conversation with another black woman where I'm like, you don't even have to explain it. I get it. I see it. I get where you're coming from and where you're putting all of these ones together.
Yeah, yeah,
Right?
and the the
Mm-hmm.
pain in that person, where you just
Mm-hmm.
like, oh mon Dieu,
Yeah.
I, and time continues, right?
Yes, it is. Yep.
And then when she's going to be in her 40s, 50s, you're going to look back at the beautiful young woman that she was, and the sort of
Yeah.
you know, the incapacity of seeing that or feeling that,
At that
unable,
particular
right?
moment.
Ah,
Yeah.
ah, ah, ah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, I also teach a psychology of women course, and when
Mm,
we talked about being the objects of desire, it made me think of
mm,
a documentary that I get my students to watch. That's called Subjects of Desire, and it
mm,
is about black women being seen as subjects of desire because, like you said, we're not usually seen as such. Most times, we don't get to see ourselves represented unless we're being represented under a stereotype: Jezebel, the Mammy, the Sapphire. Like there's a lot more, right? And when you don't see yourself fitting into that, how then do you make sense of your identity? Especially when you also have the cultural ways of looking at things, and somehow you don't fit in that either. You don't fit in
mm.
this one, you don't fit in that one.
Yeah,
So where do you
yeah.
end up fitting? And I agree, when it comes to what happens later on, we tend to end up living with more of that regret of why didn't I see how beautiful I was? So this is the body that I would should have appreciated because now
But
I
like,
don't
yeah,
see
like
it.
it's time, and I mean,
Mhm,
it's not a bad thing to live
mhm,
with time and say, okay, you know
mhm,
what, um, I'm going to be 20 years older, God
mhm.
willing,
Yeah.
and then let me enjoy this time, right? But
Mhm.
let me enjoy every time,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I
Because
wish
change has
these young
value.
women, I wish them, please enjoy this time. Yeah,
Hmm. Yeah.
it's mm,
And I think that is one of the least valued ways of us talking about wellness within our community is not
mm,
necessarily rushing to the next stage or wanting
yeah,
to see ourselves in the next phase, but sitting down and being with the phase that we're in. There's
yes,
beauty within that phase.
yes, and then
Right?
yes, all of it, like
Yeah.
all of it.
Yeah.
What are the where is the tastiness in all of
Hmm.
this?
Yeah.
How can I really,
Mhm. Yeah.
I'm still making gestures.
Yes. Where are all the senses that come with it? Like
Yes,
smell
how
it,
do we
embrace it, taste
saturate the
it. Yeah.
senses?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Me with all of
You
those
see,
different
thinking
senses.
about this, I started out and I was chilly and now I'm warm.
I hope it's a warm that feels like a warm embrace of like, yes, this
Yes,
is a
I'm
great.
warm. I'm feeling warmer.
Yes. Oh, perfect. Beautiful. We do have someone who shared that it is only recent that the healthcare, community education, law enforcement has even started focusing on well-being as part of the care plans, right? Where oftentimes the focus was, is it truly about rehabilitating people? Is it truly about educating people? Is it moving people through systems rather than truly taking care of them, right? So um, sometimes the barriers of religion, cost, stigma, access, education prevent people from accessing professional services because of that. Because how can I show up in your office and you only see the problem, and then you don't get to see all of these other things that are taking place behind? And how do we understand that, right? Because I think we are moving towards seeing individuals as a whole instead of just pieces.
Mm.
or you're just a student right now. No, you may be a sister, you may be a daughter as well, and that comes with all of these different roles and obligations and expectations that you have to fulfill, right? So I think that comment is very much on point with what we are talking about, of looking not only at the mental health care as part of a system, but as part of that community healing and part of how we take care of ourselves as well.
I want
Um,
to say something about these different ways of looking at things. I'm thinking a lot about religion and spirituality
mhm,
and mental health, right? Like
mhm,
I'm thinking a lot about, like for example, in Rwanda, recently there was a study where they realized, like they deployed mental health services
mhm,
all over, even into the district level, right? And they realized that it was severely underutilized, very, very underutilized, which I find fascinating. And I, of course, want to, like, of course, I want to now
mhm,
find out why is it underutilized. But
mhm,
the what they found was that the small amount of people who were looking for help were split between traditional practitioners,
mhm,
religious practices,
mhm,
and mental health practices. And I
mhm,
thought that those might not be so far from our own community, sort of
mm,
um, like from the diasporas, from the communities that are abroad, like where and the thing that I was thinking about was, do we have a perspective on mental health and well-being where
mm,
these different worldviews
mhm,
can live together in an
yeah,
integrated way,
mhm,
right? Where we can say there are protective things,
mm,
there are protective elements and dimensions in religious and spiritual practice,
mhm,
right? This is the there are and it's not the same, right? They don't all not all faiths have the same
yeah,
view on suffering, healing, whatever but here are some interesting
yes,
ways in which to see suffering. Some suffering
mhm,
sometimes is presented like, in French you say une épreuve, like a challenge, right?
yeah.
Given, to which you need to
It's a
rise,
rite
right?
of
There's something,
passage. You have to go through it.
yeah,
Yeah.
there there is something that is not untrue, like that could be very useful in looking at suffering as a
That way.
challenge I'm rising to.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, until it isn't, right? If it's no
Yeah.
more not useful anymore, then maybe there's another one that is more useful,
Yeah.
right? In the
Mm-hmm.
traditional practices, right, there are different ways of depending on the traditions, depending on the rituals, etc. There are different ways of looking at things, of understanding things as this is that, and this is how you engage with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Does
Yeah.
it can it do something? Like can I in doing that connect with something that is
Yeah.
qualitatively different, that is sacred in some way, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That connects me with something that is protective for me. It's
Mm-hmm.
protective for me to feel connected to the world in some way,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Versus completely alienated,
Mm-hmm.
right? Is
Yeah.
there something in the mental health language and seeing the world that
Mm.
can they not be like, what if they were not antagonistic all the time
Yeah.
and could sort of borrow from each other,
Yes.
not willy-nilly, but
Mm-hmm.
in a way that is actually constructive? I
Yeah.
think that would be very useful for us.
Yeah. It would be very beautiful to have that intention and the meaning, right? Because when we talk about how do we understand pain, what's the meaning of it, and how do we get beyond it, and sometimes a lot of our meanings are compounded with our culture, our rituals, our traditions, right? But also, as you said, within religion, what are the ways of looking at pain and suffering? Is it something that I guess if those who like to quote the Bible will say, he does not send me things I cannot handle,
Mhm.
right?
But
So
but then also, what if he does? And
mhm,
then what? You know, can I
yeah,
can I can I go to some people for help?
am
Right?
I allowed
Is it
not to deal
still
with it
me if
myself?
I,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Can I
right?
have access to both? right, have that meaning, but also be allowed to have access to this as well. And I think
Absolutely.
the more options we have, the better, rather than less. Right? I don't know
Yeah.
why we go with that. You can't do this one and this one. How can they coexist and complement each other instead?
Complement each other. Absolutely. Yeah. And how can we sort of see, there here it doesn't work very well, but maybe it's not because it in itself doesn't work very well.
Mm,
Maybe it's because in our where I am standing,
mhm.
we prefer not to have this because of that. And then I can still
Mhm.
make a choice and say, you know
Yeah,
what? We usually don't, but
I'll try
this
this time.
might be useful. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, I don't
Yeah.
know. I find that we need to be creative. Like
Mhm.
wellness or healing is a creative practice, right? If we
Yes.
don't want to be only against something, if we want to be for, and if we want to
Mhm.
sort of find what we're for, it's something where we listen to, and it's like sometimes it takes us to places where, "Ooh, I don't know,"
Yeah.
right? And
Mhm.
then how do we experiment and how do we stay with who we are becoming, right? We don't
Yes.
know yet, right? And it's
Mhm.
it's anyway, like I get excited.
It is an exciting
It's
conversation, right?
exciting.
As you
I find
said,
it's
we're
super
always
exciting.
in progress, right? We're
Yeah.
becoming, we are always learning and getting rid of what doesn't work and adopting different ways of doing things. And that's the whole idea of having this conversation, right? If we don't, then we stay doing the same things that continue no longer being useful.
Mm.
Whereas when we open up the dialogue to different ways of looking at things, and then we find more creative solutions of doing them, right? I don't think we would have ever thought we could be in two physically different spaces, have such a conversation, and have other people joining us. Yet it's
I
happening.
mean,
Yeah, it's happening, and here we are, right? Yeah. So we have another comment, but also maybe in a question that says our appearance, and I'm assuming as Black individuals, can give us a false impression of our identity of people of color versus race. It adds a mental element that some races cannot understand or relate to,
mm,
right?
mm. I think that can happen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, I was it made me think of someone who said to me, I have friends, I can tell them this is how I
Mm.
feel, and
Yeah.
they feel, bad for like they can see that I'm not feeling well,
Mm-hmm.
but I can see that they can't put themselves there, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm,
And I mean, whether we go with the difference between sympathy and empathy, right? I can tell that you're feeling bad and I can feel bad for what's going on for you. But empathy is I can go down with you into that space and I
mm,
know it, right?
mm,
And that's why even when we're saying there's some way hands gestures that are filling in words is because we really don't even need the language to communicate that. The experience of it is felt. We can
mm.
feel it and we can hear it, right? So it is a beginning of a great conversation and one that needs to continue. To wrap us up, what are some ways that you engage in self care or wellness that you would like to share with our listeners today?
Um, my when I was smaller,
Mhm.
my my mother used to say, when I was struggling, she would say, "Why don't you talk to your grandmother?" Like
Mm,
my grandmother, who was so this no, she would say, "Speak to your ancestors, so the people who are past, right? Your
mhm,
people who are past." But she never taught me how to do that. She knew
mm,
how to do that because she was raised with someone, with her grandmother, who was raised before colonization, right? So she
mhm,
had access. She had the old ways, but so she would do it. She spoke to her grandmother all the time, but she would tell me, why don't you speak to your? And I'd be like, but how? And then recently in Toronto, it was at the end of a conference on Black mental health, and there's at the end there was this woman, this I call her in my head she's this small because she was shorter than me, but in my mind she's this this almost like a small wizard, like
Mm. Yeah.
we were in a big
As they
circle. So
normally get represented, right? That's how they get
right?
represented. It's a
And
ball
so
of knowledge.
she was this, and she was like, and she started asking us. We were a huge circle in a
Hmm.
ballroom, right?
Hmm.
She was in the middle, this little woman, and she said, "Well, how about you call the people that you're thinking about? You call them in, right?"
Mm.
And so we called our people in, and she was just pouring. She poured alcohol and she poured
Okay.
water, right,
Hmm.
into a bowl, a bassinet, and I was like, "Could it be that
What?
easy? What?" And I really felt it, right?
Yeah.
I felt my grandfather. I
Hmm.
was like, I can do.
Mm.
So
Hmm.
now I have a little bowl, right,
Oh,
that I
yeah.
took from my husband because it's very pretty, but it's part of his sort of like, do you mind if I? And I took the bowl,
Yeah.
and it's really pretty. And I don't drink alcohol, so I was like, yeah, I know that the spirits like
Hmm.
spirits, but
Hmm.
you don't mind if I give you water, right? And so
Mm.
I pour a little bit of water, and whenever I see the, I can connect to that feeling of the
Good.
sacred, right? And just it's just a feeling of connection from
Hmm.
time to time, where I'm like,
Yeah.
it's nice to feel that we're not alone.
Yeah,
Mm.
literally, we are standing on the shoulders of our ancestors and we can call upon them and have access to them. Oh, that is a very beautiful thing. And if you've ever listened here before, you've probably heard me reference the Black Panther. And I think it really took me into a scene where he takes the herb and then he gets access to the ancestors, right? Like
Yeah.
that connection of it. And I think there's a lot of symbolism within that movie that we don't think about. But when you say that, I connected that to be like, yeah, they didn't just do this purposely. It was like intentional. It's like that's how you call upon your ancestors with the
Yes,
spirits
the
and
idea that
everything.
what if it
Yeah,
were, what if it's the same water that hydrates me,
yeah,
that
hydrate.
allows me to connect,
Yeah.
and then the idea that somebody else created, like I
Mhm,
have a connection, association to the
mhm.
sacred, and I can recreate that association in the sacred in the quotidian, in the everyday.
Yeah. Yeah, is beautiful. So where can people find you? Is there a website, social media that you can share with us? So if they want to
Um,
continue the conversation, they will
yes,
be able
the
to have
the
access.
the I'm the website should be up soon. It's www.omora healing, so OMORA healing in one word.com. I am Lisa Ndejuru on Facebook, or I think Dr. Lisa Ndejuru. I have a official face too. Um, I think I'm available on email, lndejuru@gmail.com. I am always happy to hear from people.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you so much for such a beautiful conversation and
Thank you
a
for
warm
having
one,
me.
in fact, right?
Huh?
Literally and physically, a warm conversation, both
Yes,
literally and physically.
yes. It was
Yes.
very nice.
Well, this has been another episode of Coping in Color. Thank you so much, Dr. Lisa, for joining me today. We will see you next time, and thank you for the questions and engaging with us. I hope when you listen to this, you feel slightly connected with a few people. If it's
Mhm.
just us, great. If it creates another conversation outside of this, even better.
Even
Thank you
better.
so much. Thank you, Dr. Lisa.
Okay, we are no longer live. That was amazing. Perfect. Hold
Do you need us to stay for a minute?
on. Everyone seems to be uploaded perfectly, so you guys are good to go. Thank you so much. Um,
Thank you. That was really nice.
Yes, it was lovely.
yes, so you guys are good to go. Thank you so much. Alisa, you can find this on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. If you need any help finding them, just send me an email. But you guys are all good to go.
Okay.
I think you're on mute.